Welcome everyone. Myself Riya from Sri Venkateshwara College of Engineering from CSE Data Science Department. Today, I'll be giving a presentation on ER diagram for Student Attendance Management System from the subject DBMS. The agenda for today's presentation would be what is ER diagram, the components of ER diagram, and we would be dealing with entity, attribute, and relation. Finally, we'll understand all these concepts with a small example on student attendance management. So, what is ER diagram? An entity relationship diagram in DBMS, it is a visual representation of different entities within a system and how they relate to each other. It works as a blueprint for designing and modeling databases. It is a high-level data model. It develops a conceptual design for the database. It also develops a very simple and easy to design view of data. Components of ER diagram. Here, ER model is categorized into entity, attribute, and relation. Entity is further categorized into weak entity. Attribute is further subcategorized into key attribute, composite attribute, multi-valued attribute, derived attribute. One-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-one, and many-to-many are subcategories of relation. So, what is entity? An entity may be an object, class, person, or a place. In the ER diagram, an entity can be represented as rectangles, as employee and department can be considered as an entity here. Weak entity. An entity that depends on another entity is called as weak entity. The weak entity does not contain any key attribute of its own. We'll understand the term key attribute later on. Further moving on, what is an attribute? The attribute is used to describe the property of an entity. Eclipse is used to represent an attribute. Here, student name, roll number, phone number, and email ID are few attributes for the entity student. Types of attributes are composite attributes, single-valued attributes, key attributes, derived attributes, multi-valued attributes, and simple attributes. So first, we'll deal with key attributes. The key attribute is used to represent the main characteristics of an entity. It represents a primary key. The key attribute is represented by an ellipse with the text underlined. Here, student ID, age, name, and address are few attributes for the entity student. And student ID is the key attribute as it is represented by an ellipse with the text underlined. Next is composite attribute. An attribute that composed of many other attributes is known as composite attribute. The composite attribute is represented by an ellipse, and those ellipses are connected with another ellipse. Here, address is an attribute to the entity student. PIN, street, and house number is an attribute for the entity address. Next, dealing with multi-valued attribute, an attribute which have more than one value. These attributes are known as multi-valued attributes. The double oval is used to represent the multi-valued attribute. Here, phone number and email ID are few such examples for multi-valued attribute, as a student can have multiple phone numbers and multiple email IDs. Last but not the least, derived attribute. An attribute that can be derived from another attribute is termed as derived attribute. It is represented by a dashed ellipse. For example, a person's age changes over time and can be derived from another attribute like date of birth. Here, the student entity consists of roll number, gender, date of birth, and age as its attribute, and age is the derived attribute here. Finally, we will be dealing with relation or relationship. A relationship is used to describe the relation between two entities. A diamond or rhombus is used to represent the relation. One-to-one, many-to-one, many-to-many, a few such examples. This is a summary of all the attributes. Here, address is a simple attribute. Student ID is a prime or key attribute, as student ID is a text underlined. Here, name is a composite attribute, as first name and last name is further categorized from name. Here, age is a derived attribute as it can be derived from the attribute date of birth. Course is a multi-valued attribute because of the double ellipse. Final part of the presentation. Course, students, attendance, activities, year level, school year are the few entities for this ER diagram. Course name, ID, and course initial are attributes for the entity course. Here, ID is the key attribute as the text is underlined. Course ID, first name, user ID, student barcode, last name, middle name, year level ID are the attributes for the entity students. And activity ID, student ID, date recorded, time recorded, and status are the attributes for the entity attendance. Here, ID is again a key attribute because of the text underlined. School year ID, activity name, description, date of activity, and banner are attributes for the entity activities. Year level and ID are the attributes for year level, ID, and year are attributes for school year. You may have noticed few rhombus or diamond shaped symbols. It means relation. Has here is used to describe the relationship between the entity course and students. Has here is used to describe the relation between students and attendance. Meanwhile, records is used to describe the relationship between activities and attendance. These are few more examples. That's all with my presentation. Do like, share, and subscribe.